The laughter came first, soft, deliberate, and cruelly controlled, cutting through the sterile silence of the glass-walled boardroom. It wasn't the kind of laughter born from joy, it was sharpened, calculated, meant to sting. Every head turned toward the sound, but no one dared to react. At the center of it all stood the mistress, impeccably dressed, her red lips curved into a smile that carried more poison than sweetness. She enjoyed this moment. She had planned it. Across from her sat the wife. She didn't look broken. That alone unsettled the room. The city skyline glimmered behind them, 1,000 stories of power and money reflected in the glass. This room had seen hostile takeovers, ruthless negotiations, and billion-dollar decisions made without mercy. Yet nothing compared to the tension that now coiled tightly in the air. The billionaire, husband, mogul, kingmaker, sat rigidly in his chair, his jaw clenched, eyes darting between the two women. He had built empires, crushed rivals, bent governments. But right now, he looked like a man who had miscalculated the one variable he never thought would turn against him. The mistress took a step closer to the wife, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "I thought you'd be more emotional," she said lightly, her tone dripping with false concern. "Most women are, when they realize they've been replaced." A few executives lowered their eyes. Others pretended to study documents that suddenly seemed fascinating. No one intervened. Power had taught them silence. The wife folded her hands over a thick contract folder resting on the table. Her posture was straight, elegant, composed, almost unsettling in its calm. She wore no flashy jewelry, no dramatic colors. Just quiet confidence, tailored into silken resolve. Her eyes met the mistress's without flinching. The mistress leaned in further, emboldened by the lack of response. "Don't worry," she continued, her smile widening. "You'll be well taken care of. He's generous with people who know when to step aside." The words were meant to humiliate, to provoke tears or anger. That was the performance everyone expected, the public unraveling of a woman who had just lost everything. The mistress wanted witnesses. She wanted victory to be seen. But the wife didn't blink. Inside, however, memories stirred, years of loyalty, of sacrifices made quietly while the empire grew louder. She remembered signing documents late at night while her husband slept, trusting her judgment without question. She remembered being named, casually, almost dismissively, as the sole authority on certain contracts, for convenience. She remembered noticing when affection turned distant, when ambition grew colder. She had seen this moment coming long before anyone else in the room. The billionaire cleared his throat, attempting control. "Let's stay focused on the agenda," he said, though his voice lacked its usual command. The mistress laughed again, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be shy," she said, eyes locked on the wife. "She deserves to hear the truth." Still, nothing. The wife's fingers slowly tightened around the folder. The leather creaked softly, a small sound, but sharp enough to slice through the room. Her gaze drifted briefly to the contract beneath her hands, then back to the mistress. In that glance was something unreadable, something that made the smile on the other woman's face falter for half a second. No one noticed the subtle shift except one executive at the far end of the table, who suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. The wife inhaled calmly, deeply, as if grounding herself before standing at the edge of a cliff. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, not yet. Because this was only the beginning, and the people watching had no idea they were seconds away from witnessing the collapse of a billion-dollar illusion. The wife rose slowly from her chair, and the faint scrape of wood against marble sounded louder than thunder in the suffocating silence. Conversations died instantly. Even the city beyond the glass walls seemed to pause, frozen in time. The mistress's confident smile lingered for a moment longer, as if she were waiting for tears, accusations, or a dramatic plea. What she got instead was far more unsettling. The wife stood tall, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve with unhurried precision. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, the kind that came from certainty rather than impulse. She placed both palms flat on the table, right beside the thick contract folder, and finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried effortlessly to every corner of the room. "You wanted honesty," she said. "So let's be honest." The billionaire stiffened. He recognized the tone, the same one she used when finalizing deals that changed markets overnight. A quiet warning flickered in his eyes, but it was too late to stop what had already begun. The wife opened the folder and slid the document out, smoothing it carefully as though it were something precious. Legal clauses, signatures, and official seals stared up from the page. Several executives leaned forward unconsciously, recognizing the contract at once. It was the cornerstone of the company's future, a partnership worth billions, whispered about in financial circles as untouchable. The mistress glanced down, unimpressed. "Paper doesn't scare me," she scoffed. "Power does." A faint smile touched the wife's lips, not of amusement, but of understanding. "Exactly," she replied. She lifted the contract with both hands, holding it high enough for everyone to see. Her eyes met her husband's for the first time since the meeting began. In them was no anger, no sadness, only clarity. The billionaire opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to interrupt, perhaps to negotiate, but no sound came out. Then it happened. With one clean, decisive motion, the wife tore the contract straight down the middle. The sound was sharp and final, like a blade slicing through silk. Gasps erupted around the table. Someone swore under their breath. The billionaire lurched forward in his chair, disbelief flooding his face as the torn pages separated in her hands. The mistress froze, her smirk collapsing into confusion. The wife didn't stop. She tore the paper again, and again, slowly this time, each rip deliberate, almost ceremonial. Shreds fluttered down onto the polished table, onto expensive suits, onto the very symbol of their untouchable power. The room erupted into chaos, but no one dared move toward her. It felt as if stepping forward would mean stepping into something irreversible. "What are you doing?" the billionaire finally choked out, his voice cracking. The wife let the last pieces fall from her fingers. "Ending an illusion," she said softly. Executives exchanged frantic glances. They knew the fine print. They knew the clause buried deep within the agreement, the one that named her as the sole signatory with the authority to void it at will. It had been added years ago, almost as an afterthought, because she was family, because she was trusted. The mistress backed away a step, her confidence draining rapidly. "You can't just," she began, but the words died in her throat as understanding dawned. "Oh, I can," the wife replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "And I just did." The billionaire's face went ashen. In seconds, the future he had carefully constructed, new markets, global influence, a legacy beyond imagination, collapsed into worthless scraps of paper scattered across a table. His power, so loudly displayed moments ago, suddenly felt fragile. Silence crashed down again, heavier than before. The wife straightened her jacket, as composed as if she had merely concluded a routine meeting. She turned away from the table, her heels clicking calmly against the floor, leaving behind stunned faces, shattered egos, and the unmistakable sound of a billion-dollar dream falling apart. The wife's footsteps echoed softly as she walked toward the glass doors, each step steady, unhurried, final. Behind her, no one spoke. The boardroom, once alive with ambition and authority, had become a mausoleum of stunned faces and broken certainty. Torn fragments of the contract lay scattered across the table and floor like the remains of something sacred that no longer held meaning. The billionaire finally pushed himself up from his chair, hands trembling. "Wait," he called out, his voice thin, stripped of command. The word hung uselessly in the air. He had issued orders that moved markets and ruined men, yet now his plea sounded small, almost human. She paused, but did not turn around. In that moment, he understood the depth of his mistake, not the affair, not the public humiliation, but the assumption that she would always endure, always forgive, always protect the empire he built on her silent strength. He saw, too late, that her restraint had never been weakness. It had been choice. The mistress stood frozen near the table, her earlier confidence replaced by naked panic. She had imagined victory, the wife's collapse, the billionaire's gratitude, her own ascent into power and luxury. Instead, she felt the ground give way beneath her heels. Whispers began, soft at first, then sharper, as executives recalculated loyalties with ruthless speed. "Is it really void?" One of them murmured. "Yes," another replied grimly. "Completely." The mistress turned to the billionaire, searching his face for reassurance, for protection. "You'll fix this," she said, her voice tight. "You always do." He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the woman at the door, the one walking away with her dignity intact. For the first time, he looked like a man afraid of the future he could no longer control. The wife reached the door and finally turned back. Her eyes swept the room once more, taking in the chaos she had created and the truth it had revealed. When she spoke, her voice carried no triumph, no bitterness, only resolve. "This ends today," she said. "For all of us." She glanced briefly at the mistress, not with hatred, but with something closer to pity. "You mistook silence for surrender," she added. "That was your error." The mistress's lips parted, but no words came. The wife then looked at her husband. "And you," she said quietly, "mistook loyalty for ownership." The words struck deeper than any accusation. The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment, as if physically wounded. Around him, his empire began to fracture, not through scandal or attack, but through the sudden absence of the woman who had quietly held its foundations together. She turned and pushed the door open. Light flooded in from the corridor, bright and clean, a sharp contrast to the heavy air of the boardroom. As she stepped through, the doors closed softly behind her, sealing the room in stunned silence. Only then did the reality fully descend. Phones began to buzz. Advisors whispered urgently. Executives rose from their seats, already planning exits and damage control. The mistress sank slowly into a chair, her reflection in the glass revealing a woman who had won nothing at all. The billionaire remained standing, alone at the head of the table. He looked down at the torn contract, then at his own hands, as if seeing them for the first time, empty, powerless. 10 minutes ago, he had believed himself untouchable. Now, he understood the cost of arrogance. Outside, the wife walked down the corridor, her heart pounding but her head held high. She did not look back. Some endings demanded silence, not applause. And as she disappeared into the light, one truth lingered behind her like an unspoken verdict. The room had witnessed more than the destruction of a contract. It had witnessed the moment a woman reclaimed her power, and left a billionaire in its shadow.